that to understand demonology or to understand Satan or to understand any of these things, I think requires one to step out of that worldview and to look at it in a way that is comparative and can say, oh, well, there are parapsychological phenomena involved in possession cases. I mean, people float off the ground. But that doesn't mean that this is Satan or this is a demon. It might mean that the person thinks it's Satan or thinks it's a demon, sure. But I don't honor anyone's religious beliefs. You know, I mean, people can think it's all kinds of things, you know, believe it's all kinds of things. Okay, that doesn't mean it is. You know, from a comparative or a global perspective, it's something else is going on there. And I think with Jacques' work, I think he feels that the history of esotericism and certainly the history of Satan in this Carmelite nonsense has something to do with the UFO as well in a comparative sense now, because you're getting at the same kind of phenomenon, and at the root of this, you're looking at me funny, Danny. At the root of this conviction is that human beings have a capacity to experience God or reality as it really is. There's a kind of direct link there, but there's also sometimes when they have these experiences, this science fiction movie goes off and they experience demons or angels or deities, you know, or spacemen or aliens or visitors or whatever. So this folklore that develops around these cases is really important. It gives us an access to it. But if we interpret it literally, we're in trouble, because then we can only interpret that particular case literally, or we shove it back into some kind of framework that makes us comfortable, which may be wrong, which may be inadequate. I suspect it is. I suspect all of our frameworks are inadequate.
What do you think is going on when people are possessed and they have and with exorcists, with exorcisms? I
think they've experienced a lot of trauma and that they're mentally suffering and that some part of them is breaking off of their other part, and they're seeing this other part of them as the demon or the possessing the entity. That's what I think.
Have you ever witnessed an exorcism?
No, I have not. And I don't want to, by the way.
Have you ever talked to an exorcist?
No.
No.
I've read exorcists. I've read about exorcism, but I haven't actually talked to an exorcist. And I'm sure if it's an exorcist, they're going to believe that most of the cases are psychiatric or not really demonic, and they're going to believe some of the cases are. Otherwise, why would you be an exorcist? But there are lots of forms of exorcism, Danny. There's exorcism in religions all over the world. So, again, this is my question. Why is that? Why are human beings always possessed by essentially the local entities of the particular religion or the particular culture? Why is that? Well, that to me is a really good question. And it pushes back, to me, it pushes back on the human for me, and it's that, well, there's some part of this human being that's breaking off and it's taking on whatever the cultural form happens to be in the local area.
Yeah, so the spirituality of the flying saucer?
Yeah.
Why do you think that's important?
Well, it's what I'm working on now, and you know, it goes back to this idea that one of my jokes is, strange beings come out of the sky and mess with people. That's called religion. It's also called the flying saucer or the UFO. I think if you look at people's encounters with flying saucers or UFOs, there's a kind of transcendence there. There's a kind of awe and inspiration there. And by transcendence, I mean, they can't really be explained by our social location, by society, or even by nature, which is what science wants to do, by the way. It wants to build a model of the UFO that's based on the mathematics and principles of material science. And I think that's mistaken. I think the saucer appears to human beings as not part of this world. but yet a part of this world. So it appears at a particular moment in time, at a particular crisis point, a transition point, but it also talks about a world that is not society, is not the world, is not the place of the person. And to me, that's the most defining feature of the UFO phenomenon, is that otherness that I don't want to reduce to things we think we understand.
Going back to this propulsion guy, it's interesting. I don't know if you're aware, but there was a lot of science going on and a lot of research going on in the 50s into anti-gravity and into the physics behind anti-gravity. And there were two guys, a father and son. Their names are escaping me right now. Steve, you could probably find them. But they were really making progress in this anti-gravity study, and then it all went dark. Like, it stopped just out of nowhere in the 50s. And a lot of people speculate that it went dark because it went into some dark, compartmentalized government program with, like Lockheed Skunk Works and some of the stuff they're doing at Groom Lake. That's always one of the biggest, one of the most interesting things to me, because if humanity was to discover something like this, something that is beyond materialism, something that is spiritual in nature, that changes people's worldviews, that is going to make war and military and even the idea of nation states sort of obsolete in a way.
Well, okay. First of all, I'm very aware that some people are interested in the UFO because of the technology and the hardware, as it were, or the sources of energy, or the anti-gravitation propulsion, or whatever language you want. Mm-hmm. I see my role as a kind of warning or a caution there, that you can do the history of science and you can do the history of military technology, and great, go do that. But what I'm trying to say with the spirituality of the flying saucer is, maybe it's not about any of those things. Let me back up and give you an example. So last night we had a Jain lecture at my university on Jainism, which is an ancient Indian religion. And one of the images of Jainism is basically a strongly dualistic religious system in which the soul separates from the material world and realizes its own infinite immortality and becomes a sphere, by the way, often. But the images of these realized human beings is just a cutout. It's a cutout of a piece of metal or a stone, and it looks exactly like a space alien. It looks exactly like a space alien. And a kind of almost 1950s sense. Mm. And I'm like, what is going on there? I mean, that's an example of what I'm trying to talk about. Because in this religious system, it's precisely removing oneself from the material world, from the cycle of life and death, through which one realizes one's own innate immortality or infinity. They would not say God. They don't use that kind of language, but they would certainly acknowledge a kind of super state of the human being. And I'm just trying to say, as a historian, look, cultures have had these experiences, and they've even experienced the soul as a sphere. And they've talked about the soul as a sphere, by the way. Jainism is one, but Neoplatonism is another. We can go through a whole series of ancient systems in which the spirit or the soul is literally seen as a flying saucer, as it were. Okay? Why is that? Well, probably because that's how human beings experience transcendence, experience this spirituality of this soul that's above all human culture and all nation states and all religions. And again, I think that's the promise of the flying saucer. As you look up, it's up. It's not down here. And they do violate our airspace effortlessly, right? I mean, this is something that comes out even in the military reports. So there's something hopeful, I think, about the flying saucer that transcends any particular nation state or any political system or any religion or any human culture, and is a kind of global realization. And I think that's where the spirituality of the flying saucer, as I put it, really comes in. I think that's what really is attractive to a lot of people that are really fascinated by this topic today. And it may not be conscious, Danny. I'm not saying that that's a conscious or an intentional fascination, but this notion of up, you know, I mean, that's how our ancestors thought of transcendence. We were stuck on this two-dimensional plane, and we couldn't go up. And so the gods came from the sky. They came from the heavens. This is why angels have wings. This is up. Well, we've been up. There ain't anything up there.
Right.
So now transcendence comes from some other dimension, or comes from some other time. You know, we've displaced it towards other realms, as it were. So that's what I'm trying to struggle with here. Is what is our contemporary fascination, and what do they look like in this bigger picture, as it were?